He was a 30-year-old frontier bishop in the Wild West and died 56 years later as the church's presiding bishop. The church selected the Right Reverend Daniel S. Tuttle to leave New York and go west because he was physically strong and strong-willed. He recruited his brother-in-law, the Reverend George Foote, and another New Yorker, the Reverend Edward Goddard, to establish a church and bring social justice to the unsettled territories of Montana, Idaho, and Utah. Tuttle's stagecoach arrived in Salt Lake City on July 2, 1867, after a couple months crossing the Great Plains. Within a week, he was preaching in the Mormon territory with Foote and Goddard. Foote had already started a school in Salt Lake. It would be the first school in the territory that was open to all children. A half-dozen other Episcopal schools followed. Hundreds of children signed up. Over half were Mormon children. Tuttle would write, "The day schools, especially in Utah, were the backbone of missionary work." Within 3 weeks, Tuttle and Goddard went north to Montana. Tuttle was Bishop of Montana with jurisdiction over Idaho and Utah. This meant the three clerics had over 310,000 square miles to cover, most by stage and horseback. They had a lot of miles, but very little money. They followed the gold strikes. They brought the church to rough mining towns. Tuttle bought a Methodist church at a sheriff's sale in Virginia City, Montana. Tuttle left most of Montana to the Reverend Edward Goddard. It might have been the toughest job. Preaching was done in dance halls, saloons, and wherever there were souls to save. But they succeeded. The church in Virginia City even got its own building. To this day, they use the Tuttle altar that was hauled by wagon from Salt Lake City. They use Tuttle's baptismal font, and they always have Tuttle's Bible on display. A dozen Montana churches still go back to Goddard and Tuttle, including the cathedral in Helena. The stage carried Bishop Tuttle into Idaho. One trip took a week to get to a mining camp. A couple of pioneers were so taken by the will and the spirit of a man driven to reach them that they named their community after him, Tuttle, Idaho. He established the church in Boise, and part of the cathedral complex still bears his name, the Tuttle House. Meanwhile, in Utah, the church continued its social justice. Bishop Tuttle established the first hospital in the territory, St. Mark's Hospital. Previously, injured miners had no medical place to go. The Episcopal hospital charged $1 a month and guaranteed care. One injured man paid his dollar and stayed 27 years. The Reverend George Foote also started St. Mark's Cathedral. The cathedral is now Utah's oldest continuously operating church with Sunday services. When it was built, it could hold every Episcopalian in the 3 territories, from Canada to Arizona. Tuttle and his missionary clergy, Goddard and Foote, thought big and went house to house, baptizing, confirming, marrying, and burying. They walked, rode stages, and finally trains. They carried Bibles and enough food to get them from town to town. Tuttle once spent a full winter with no company except for his cat. He would later accept the call to become Bishop of Missouri, and then would spend 23 years as presiding bishop. But he never forgot his sense of social justice, of education and service as presiding bishop, and the service of people such as the Reverends Foote and Goddard. He raised up missionaries in the West and in the East. The church named the New York House for Foreign and Domestic Missionaries as Windham House after Tuttle's birthplace, as that town produced the iconic missionary Bishop Tuttle. And as a missionary himself, he introduced and opened the church to miners, cowboys, and to all through educational opportunities for all when there were no opportunities prior. Under presiding Bishop Tuttle's tenure as PB, the first school to train African American women to be church workers was started. Upon his death, the school, which was called a training school for colored deaconesses and social and parish workers, was named after Bishop Tuttle. In their words, the Women's Auxiliary Executive Board voted to make it a memorial to what they said was our late beloved presiding bishop. Today, there are memories, there are dozens of churches, generations of Episcopalians, 3 dioceses, Montana, Idaho, and Utah, that owe their existence to Tuttle, Foote, and Goddard, and another diocese, Missouri, which was blessed by Tuttle, as well as the whole church from his 24 years as presiding bishop. But perhaps just as importantly, because of Tuttle, Foote, and Goddard, thousands of people found social justice and dignity in healthcare, education, and were accepted as being made in God's image. They were clerics, they were missionaries, they made life better for those in the shadows of social justice 150 years ago and for those in the shadows of social justice today.